Okay guys, I'm sorry it's taken 3 videos to get to the actual meat of the story, but as you could see from the previous 2 videos, there's so much just bullshit to deal with. It's difficult to know even where to begin. And as I was saying to someone on Facebook, when Random Assault tried to do this and cover this, the Saga of Chris Chan, it was like 12 hours. It took them 4 episodes. Each episode was like 3 hours. So as long as this seems, this is the Cliff Notes version. Let's just start going through the sagas of Chris Chan. Chris Chan's life is so long, and there's so much stuff that happens. They divide it up into phases. Yeah, that's how crazy this whole thing is. Let's just start going through this, and once again, I'm going to forget a lot of stuff, but we're going to move forward positively, try to cover as much as possible. So the longest saga in the life of Chris Chan was the Megan saga. Chris Chan used to go to a store called the Game Place. Game Place was a place that sold video games, trading cards, toys, all kinds of stuff, and it was also kind of like a community comic book store. If you don't have one in town, we have one where I live, and people used to go there to play Magic cards, to hang out, to play board games. They had a room in the back where people played D&D. All that kind of fun stuff. So the Game Place was basically that. In particular, it was a gym for the Pokemon trading card game. Now, you may know gyms from the video games and from Pokemon Go, but the Pokemon trading cards are kind of actually one of the biggest and most enduring card games. And there were gym leaders, and kind of the duty of the gym leader was to teach the younger kids how to play the game, to collect points, etc., and to referee matches. Chris Chan was caught on video at the Game Place once as part of a news story on Pokemon cards, and he has an Ash Ketchum costume, and he wore that for years. And there was a time that the gym leader was sick, and so he was temporarily made assistant gym leader, kind of like assisted to the regional gym leader. However, they quickly removed him from the spot because he screamed at the kids, threw stuff at them, and threw temper tantrums when he lost. Despite being like 25 at the time, he couldn't beat kids at a children's card game. Yes, I know it sounds like Yu-Gi-Oh! The abridged series, but he couldn't do it. And apparently he was also especially mean to the black kids, but that's neither here nor there. So he would hang out at the Game Place. Chris Chan tends to hang out at places. Because where else is he going to go? So when he was there, he met Megan Schrader, who was the first sweetheart, and it was the beginning of his love quest. They were actually kind of friends. They'd play Pokemon together, video games together. Because she was a girl, Chris Chan immediately started hitting on her, often aggressively. We aren't sure if he groped her or whatever. Things were kind of heading in that direction, and she kind of used him as a debit card to buy pictures of Nazis for her, because she had a sexual attraction, as far as we can tell, to pictures of Nazis. So on that note, so Chris Chan was just hanging out at the Game Place, and this is when he kind of started drew attention to the internet. From my understanding, people were posting about webcomics on on Something Awful, back when Something of Awful was a thing. I think the only place Something Awful is really still alive is in EVE Online with Goonswarm Federation. But that's neither here nor there. So they were posting a thread about weird webcomics, and someone who went to school with Chris Chan posted about Sonichu. And they started looking through, because Chris Chan had multiple Sonichu websites. He had all his comics up online. He posts everything about his life online. So people immediately found all this stuff, and it just exploded, and there became thread after thread. I think there was a whole sub-forum of just stuff about Chris Chan. So it was around this time that the trolls started to make contact with him and started screwing with him. And upon realizing that he really doesn't like homosexuality, they started making porn of his Sonichu, of the Sonichu characters he made, because he's a character within Sonichu who transforms into Chris Chan Sonichu, becomes the main character after he removes Sonichu. So they make a bunch of gay porn of him fucking Sonichu, and then they also make ones of Rosichu with a penis, which he calls a pickle. And it leads Chris to make multiple videos going, "I'm straight, I like China, He calls vaginas China, and he calls his dick a pickle. Actually, his dick is severely deformed, and he frequently takes pictures of it. And he tattooed a picture of Sonichu on it. So take that for what it's worth. They started making that, so what wound up happening is he decided to make his own porn, so he made porn called She Came for CWC, and it's a picture of him power fingering. So what happened was they said, oh, that's Crystal, because Crystal is his sister slash daughter slash love interest in the comics, and they made an image. He made the image, and they're like, well, that's kind of creepy if you're having sex with your daughter. And then he goes, oh no, it's not Crystal, it's Megan. And then he drew a bunch more porn of him and Megan eventually found it, and things didn't really turn out very well. And when she confronted him, he said, look, I made the porn because it made it so I wouldn't rape you. That's literally what he said. He's like, well, if I hadn't have made the porn, then I would have raped you. So what do you expect me to do? Also, within this, we're going to head on to the Adam Stackhouse Saga, which is kind of a subpoint in this. So after Chris Chan loses his relationship, or I guess kind of one of the few real friendship of his life with Megan, for being a creepy sex fiend who drew pornography of her and posted it on his website, we have in the middle of this, before everything went completely down, the Adam Stackhouse Saga. I'm just going to start moving through the different sagas. The Adam Stackhouse Saga was, there is a contest based on the game Parappa the Rappa, which is apparently a PSP game. I've never played it. So the first prize in the Parappa the Rappa contest was, if you won, you would get 2 PSPs in an all-expense paid trip to PAX. So Chris Chan had this idea that he was going to win. He was going to give Megan one of the PSPs. They were going to go and they would make love for the first time and commit themselves to each other in the hotel room, which is kind of a very common thing with a lot of NEETs and autistics. They have this really strange worldview where everything's kind of like a movie, this unrealistic thing. So they had to submit a video of them singing a song from Parappa the Rappa, and they weren't allowed to use music, which Chris Chan used. Now the person who won was Adam Stackhouse, and he did like all this cool video editing, he had beatboxing, he got his family involved, so he won. Now during this process, Chris Chan is very well known on the PlayStation forum, so he made dozens of sock accounts to vote for himself. He tried to get his brother, who is Alan Smithy, who is a famous movie critic who is counted in Rotten Tomatoes, and he was one of like 2 people to vote down Toy Story 3 and to say it's a bad movie. And he asked him to vote for him, and he said, I'll vote for you if you tell me who my real father is. If you can find that out, and Barbara won't say who his real father is. And he actually had left the house by the time Chris Chan was born. But Chris Chan actually managed to come in the top 10 because no one entered the contest because he voted for himself so many times. But he was extremely angry, and so he made a series of videos attacking Adam Stackhouse and threatening to kill him. He started trying to troll Sony, etc., etc., and all the craziness that went out of that just drew more and more trolls to him. As it says here, this was the last time that a real person would actually bring him forward. So Encyclopedia Dramatica made an article about him. He tried to make his own one, and the Encyclopedia Dramatica one isn't super interesting. It just got a lot of attention to him, and his attempts to get rid of it, etc., was just kind of a ongoing disaster. So let's move on to the next big thing. So the first kind of major fake girlfriend who was trolling him was Blanca Wise. Blanca Wise means a white girl, I think, or white. So she was his first internet sweetheart. She basically just played with him. One second, let me just bring this up. So the Blanca Saga wasn't particularly interesting, but we got all kinds of stuff. I think some of the first nude pictures of him, there was a team of people who controlled the Blanca account. They used generic photos, and they fooled him into thinking that she was in love with him. And yeah, it was one of the first pictures of Chris naked. And ultimately what they did was Blanca, the account controlling Blanca, said, if you love me, you'll send me the Sonichu medallion. So they cut up the Sonichu medallion, stuck it in a jar full of pickles, because Chris Chan really hates pickles because they remind him of dicks and he has a phobia of dicks. And then they lit it on fire and destroyed it. Eventually the troll group kind of fell apart and it wasn't particularly long or interesting, but it was kind of the beginning of what was going to happen. We have Clyde Cash, who is kind of one of Chris Chan's main arch nemesis. Clyde Cash, the image of him is literally the first image result if you type in Guido. Clyde Cash's background, some of these are real people. His brother was a massive fan of Sonichu, and Chris hadn't been producing Sonichu anymore and actually declared that he had canceled Sonichu because he was too lazy to work on it. So Clyde Cash's brother committed suicide over the whole thing, and Clyde Cash had a quest for revenge. He would eventually go on to create the Miscreants, which was a parody of the Patriots from Metal Gear Solid. There's a lot of Metal Gear references. The whole thing preventing Chris Chan from losing his virginity and to destroy his life. Yeah, so Clyde Cash showed up and began trying to just destroy him, and many of the things over the years after this were caused by Clyde Cash. So next we have the Panda Halo Saga. So Panda Halo was a troll girlfriend from Australia, and Chris sent her all kinds of footage of him engaging in sex acts, including footage of him jerking off. So he sent Panda Halo a PSP that he had bought for Megan. He was talking about how he would have sex with a dog if she would eventually have sex with him. So these people, you have to keep in mind, have literally dozens of, like, hundreds of phone calls with him. And this is all just kind of taking over the surface. As part of Clyde Cash's campaign of revenge against Chris Chan for causing his brother's suicide, Clyde Cash flew to Australia and raped Panda Halo, who got pregnant with Clyde's child. So what wound up happening was Clyde decided to marry Panda Halo and take care of their baby in his secret evil lair, and Chris tried to pressure Panda Halo into getting an abortion or to abandon the child to the man who raped her so that Panda could live with Chris at his parents' house. Knew that Clyde's act of rape had gotten Panda addicted to sex, and she expressed some interest in threesomes with Chris and Clyde. In the end, Panda gave Chris an ultimatum that if he could get Sonichu made into a real Nintendo game so that Chris could support their future family together, she would abort Clyde's baby and live with him as his sex-addicted baby-spewing wife. So basically, Chris Chan couldn't figure it out. He never contacted Nintendo because he was too lazy. He was killed by bushfires in Australia because there was a fire that happened and he assumed she died in it. Her talked to him afterwards, but he still thought she died even though she was talking to him later. So he said, I recently learned that she was still alive, married to Clyde Cash and with a healthy child. Even though memorial dedications were apparently a loss, I wish them many happy years in their marriage. The Miyamoto Saga. People contacted Chris pretending to be Miyamoto and Reggie Fils-Aimé, and they were claiming that they wanted to make the Sonichu video game. And and Chris legitimately believed that this was Miyamoto and Reggie, and they asked for some like modest things. Could you get us some drawings? Could you like tell us how the game is going to go, etc., etc. And he was unwilling or unable to do any of it. And they claimed they'd make his game a reality if he would go to the Nintendo headquarters, but he was too lazy to do that. So he made a PowerPoint presentation where he was presenting it, and he literally just talked about himself and didn't talk about the game at all. Yeah, that was kind of what happened, and eventually, because he was lazy and didn't do anything, they told him to fuck off. So now we're going to get into probably the lowest this whole thing has gone, which is the Julie Saga. So Julie was I guess his third sweetheart. And this person really fucked with him more than anyone else. They demanded all sorts of sex tapes. They had phone sex with him a whole bunch of times. Julie tricked him into buying her. She got him to give her like the credit card numbers, and they ran up a ton of money from his credit cards. They made him engage in all kinds of depraved sex acts and all this other stuff. I mean, the whole thing is really hideous. So what happened at one point was the mysterious brother of Julie, Blue Spike, apparently kidnapped her and was going to torture and kill her unless Chris Chan traveled to Ohio and rescued her. So Chris Chan drove all the way to Ohio and back in one day. When he drove to Ohio and back, it turned out they had, of course, given him a fake address, and they sent him to the middle of a ghetto. As kind of a gesture of love, he sent her multiple videos of him having sex with a sex doll, yelling, "Julie! Julie!" It's very disturbing, but those videos are on the Quickie. So what wound up happening is Julie managed to get control of his PSN account and website, and he was blackmailed by her brother Spike into declaring Billy Mays as the mayor of Quickville. And to get his account back, they made him break up his medallion and shove it up his ass, which probably could have killed him. So just keep in mind, whenever you think Chris Chan's bad, the trolls are much, much worse people. So what wound up happening is, after he did all this, it was revealed that Julie was actually a 13-year-old boy who had been groomed by the guy who controlled Clyde Cash to pretend to be a woman. Now, just keep this in mind for a minute. Chris Chan was having phone sex on a regular basis with a 13-year-old boy, and this 13-year-old boy was basically groomed to do all this stuff by Clyde Cash, or whoever the hell was controlling him. None of these are real people, so it's kind of hard to know who really did what in this story. But, yeah, so Chris Chan was controlled by Clyde Cash, and it turned out that this whole thing was... Yeah, so it's very profoundly disturbing, and it's kind of the lowest point this ever went. Some of the trolls actually thought that basically coercing someone into being a pedophile was going too far, even as far as the trolling went. So, in general, though, people managed to justify it because most of the people who troll Chris Chan are more than likely sociopaths, and they do this sort of thing for fun, tormenting autistic man-children, I mean. So, in between this and another saga, we had a troll named Emily who went on a date with Chris in real life. This actually happened. And she went on a date with Chris as a way to troll him and to give him hopes that he might be going somewhere. So, Chris's father, Bob, went along with Chris on the date, and he was actually doing a better job chatting her up and flirting with her than Chris was, ironically enough. So what wound up happening is, near the end of the debate, when Chris thought he was about to get a kiss, the man in the pickle suit shows up. And there's a picture of him, and the man in the pickle suit was one of Chris's arch nemesis, who was working for Clyde Cash, as we've discussed earlier. So the man in the pickle suit showed up and stole Emily away. Because, as mentioned previously, Chris really hates pickles because they remind him of dicks. The man in the pickle suit becomes yet another of Chris's many arch nemesis. And I think you have to keep in mind and cut Chris a little slack. I mean, the guy has a completely distorted view of reality. But if there was, like, a conspiracy of people called who like have an organizational name, the Miscreants, and they do shit like set up fake dates and have guys with pickle suits ruin your dates, you're probably going to become something of a psycho. You're not going to really understand reality because you literally live in a bad Metal Gear game. And speaking of bad Metal Gear game, we come to everybody's favorite saga in Chris Chan. Or actually, should we even bother talking about Ivy? I don't think Ivy was really that interesting. I'm just going to skip Ivy because I didn't find it that interesting. Nevertheless, Ivy was committed suicide for whatever reason because Chris rejected her or something happened. So Chris Chan was in love with yet another woman, and they basically led him on for months, and then they had her commit suicide. How many people, like, of the people who have flirted with him, one got stolen by the man in the pickle suit, one died in a fire and got raped and married his arch nemesis. One of them, another one committed suicide. I mean, it's pretty messed up. And then we get into the Vanessa saga, which is also not that interesting. One of Chris's few in real life friends managed to get Chris in believing that High School Musical actress and pop star Vanessa Hudgens was in contact with him and was going to wind up getting married to him or something. Also, it kind of breaks Chris's whole... Chris Chan said he would only be interested in white girls. As for Vanessa Hudgenson's background, I think she's part Filipino. I'm not sure if she's a mestiza or a castiza, because in the Philippines they call half whites, half... They use the same terminology as colonial Spain. And I also forgot to mention that during the Miyamoto saga, Chris Chan believed that Jay-Z was his lawyer. Now, to be fair, I don't think he knew who Jay-Z was. I can't really blame him for not knowing who Jay-Z was. I don't listen to rap, so if he wasn't in the news for other things, I don't know like who a lot of rappers are. So it's not really that interesting. I'm going to have to just cut this off, and I think I'll do the Liquid Saga as its own like 5 to 10 minute bonus video just because it's so crazy. But we're going to talk a little bit about Rocky Shoemaker and Chris Chan's religion. So Chris Chan is actually not an atheist or irreligious. He is a Methodist. And we'll talk about a bit more about this once we get to the Tom Girl saga. I'm trying not to spoil that. But Chris Chan does go to church every week. He believes he's received several visions from God. He doesn't understand how God works, so he calls him God Jesus. And as I said, he believes in the Trinity of God, Jesus, and the bear conductor. And he got kicked out of his first church once the pastor found all of his online porn stuff and just for being a nuisance and harassing the congregation. We sing All Are Welcome a lot of times every on certain Saturdays, but I don't know. I can see people kicking Chris Chan out. I mean, Jesus said, go and sin no more. Jesus was like, okay, we'll accept you, we'll forgive you, but you have to work at some extent in trying to fix your life. And Chris Chan has zero intent to fix his life. Rocky Shoemaker was a pastoral counselor appointed by his church to try to help Chris. They tried to contact the cops over the whole thing. So she tried to get Chris to quit the internet. I think she got him to destroy his PS3, which he called his life upgrade, and he actually had sex with his PS3, I think several times. But anyway, she tried to help him. A general problem with Chris's life, and like I said, it's kind of hard to talk about this too much, I just figured I'd mention it, is he goes to a liberal Christian church, and liberal Christianity basically affirms whatever you want to do. Chris Chan's like creepy stalking of women, his reluctance to get a job, his general just wretched behavior is reaffirmed by his church, and they support him pretty much no matter what he did. The only person to stand up to him, the previous pastor, left. Once that got changed over, he got to go back. And I'll just show you let's see here. Rocky provided a great deal of information about Chris's home life to a troll posing as a court-appointed psychiatrist in the run-up to one of his court appearances. During this call, it was revealed that Bob Chandler had died due to bug bites. And just one more thing before we end this portion, there's so much insanity to do. Chris Chan got kicked off out of the GameSpot. That was the place where he was the deputy gym leader, the game place, and he kept trying to go back to it. And one time, I think he tried to run Michael Schneider, who was the man who owned it, down, and he ran over him twice. And Michael Schneider, generously enough, refused to press charges so long as they'd pay for his medical bills. And Chris Chan made a number of things yelling at him. However, as I've noticed in my life, if you're mentally ill but not quite mentally ill enough to be put in jail, typically get off scot-free with really minimal punishment. So yeah, he tried to kill Michael Schneider and he almost went to jail over it, but they pulled out at the last minute. So that is the end of part 2. Next time we're just going to cover the Liquid Saga just because it's awesome. And then there'll be one more video kind of covering what's happened up to, including the present, where shit really gets bad. And I know you're saying, Argent, how can it be worse than those pictures you showed of the filth that he lives in? Oh, my friends, it's going to get so much worse. You have no idea.